All right, welcome. I am Cornelia Hill, and thank you for joining me for another AM Conversations as always. These conversations are designed to help us engage God's Word in a way that strengthens our faith and challenges our perspective. Because every time we gain God's perspective, we gain the opportunity for a new beginning. And so sometimes the breakthrough we need is not a new circumstance, but it's a new perspective. And that's why we have these conversations, not simply to hear what the text says, not only to hear just what the text says, but to have a desire to seek God, what God may be saying to us through the text. Because some of the most important conversations, let's rephrase that, the most important conversations we will ever have are conversations with the Lord and concerning his word. And so my prayer is that every AM conversation causes you to revisit familiar passages that we talk about here and beyond with fresh eyes and a renewed desire to seek God more for yourself. And so that brings us to the place where we're going to have a quick flashback of what we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. And so we've been talking in Genesis 16. And there in week 1, we found when faith gets tired. We discovered in Genesis 16, in the beginning, this is not just a story about a woman who stopped believing. That's on the surface level. But we went a little further. It's the story of a woman who stopped believing God's promise and could still, stop believing God's promise could still happen for her. And then in week 2, we talked about when tired faith creates its own solution. We watched Sarah become weary of waiting, and we watched her create a plan. We watched Abram agree with the plan. She got him to agree with her. And that's something. And then we watched the plan work. Hagar conceived. The objective that Sarah had was accomplished. The solution was there, but the peace disappeared. And that brings us to today's conversation. Today's conversation, because we never should attempt to help God. But whenever we do, there is often a consequence attached to our intervention. Can we agree? It is always. And so today's conversation is entitled, When Your Solution Becomes Your Problem. When your solution becomes your problem. Come on, let's go into the conversation.
Join us for the Night Watch, an intercessory prayer experience dedicated to watchfulness, prayer, and spiritual strengthening. Beginning Friday, May 15th, and continuing every third Friday through October, we will gather online at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for intentional intercession and prayer. Streaming live on YouTube through CamRH Ministries. Inspired by Psalm 119, verse 62. At midnight I will rise to give thanks unto thee because of thy righteous judgments. This is the Night Watch, where intercession meets intention. Save the dates.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Come on in. Invite your friends. Invite your family. Invite your foes. I gotta put this plug here. Night Watch. Powerful. Powerful. The Lord is already moving. Meet us this Friday. This is our second one. Our second Night Watch. And in this Night Watch, we're going to have our guest intercessor, Elder Loria McLeod Ellington. Elder Loria McLeod Ellington, my dear sister in the gospel. Come on, join us. She's a powerful woman of God. I'm looking forward to you being there to chime in. Stay tuned on our social media platforms to get the information to log in and be with us, right? Let's continue the conversation. So we're going to look at the foundational text, which is Genesis 16, verses 5 through 6. And I want to read, I'm going to read a portion of it in the essence of time. And Sarah said unto Abram, my wrong be unto thee. That is King James Version. And Sarah said to Abram, my wrong be unto thee. I want to pause for about a second and process what Sarah said to Abram. Because for the first time in this chapter, we begin to see emotional consequences. So emotions come on the scene of a decision that was never God's plan. And so the environment, that she was in, one of the most difficult realities in life is discovering that thing that you thought would solve the problem has become the problem itself. Most of us have experienced this in one form or another. And sometimes it is a relationship, it is a financial decision, it has been an opportunity, could have been, or a shortcut we decided to take in life. And it is something that we probably prayed for, we chased after, we sought diligently pursued, and then we obtained it, only to discover that we what we thought would bring us relief brought us additional complications. And this is the environment or the reality or the setting that Sarah finds herself in. Just a few verses earlier, she was creating a solution. And now she's managing consequences. Just a few verses earlier, she believed she had found an answer. Now she's dealing with tension she never anticipated. And this is often how self made solutions work. They rarely remain where we put them, but they grow. It's like they have legs, they expand beyond where we originally thought we put them in confinement. And so they often affect other people, which we didn't calculate. They alter a relationship that was formed in divineness, yet is altered because of something we shoved in there. They change the atmosphere, the temperature of the room. Meaning it changes the spirit of the room. And before long, the thing we created begins creating pressure in our lives. And so in verse 4, Hagar conceives, because that was the goal, right? That was the plan. That was exactly what Sarah wanted. Yet immediately after conception, the atmosphere changes. The Bible says that Sarah became despised in Hagar's eyes. So, in other words, something shifted in their relationship. I just finished talking about shoving things in relationships. And so, the moment Hagar conceived, she began seeing herself differently. And the moment Sarah recognized the shift, she began feeling differently. Now, the household is carrying tension, major tension. Now, the emotions are involved. Now, hurt is involved. Offense now shows up. And isn't it interesting how quickly situations can change? The very thing Sarah thought would help her now hurts her. And the very thing that she thought would solve her frustration now creates another frustration. Mm, Things are stacking and expanding here. And if we're honest, many of us have experienced similar moments. We thought the promotion would solve our problem. We thought that the move would solve the problem. If I move to this location, it'll solve how I'm having this problem. We thought the relationship would solve this problem. If I marry him, then I won't have to worry about financial problems. We thought the opportunity, the water looks fresher over there, so I'll go with that opportunity rather than the one that looks kind of murky. We thought the opportunity would solve the problem. And yet, after obtaining it, we discovered there were challenges attached. And these were challenges that we never considered. Because let's look at it. Every decision carries consequences. My fifth grade teacher, Miss Body, used to tell us, you do that, and she sang a song, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. Because every decision, meaning you do that, carries consequences. And every shortcut carries consequences. These consequences are here. Every self-made solution eventually reveals its true cause. So, one of the most difficult lessons in life is discovering that our decisions do not remain isolated, regardless of how we want to picture them. They're not isolated. They affect our relationships. They affect the environment that we're in, the dwellings that we're in. They affect our emotions. Sometimes those are things we never want to tell anybody about. And they affect people that we're connected to. And so in Genesis 16, we're reminded that when we step ahead of God, we often create consequences we never intended to create. Sarah wanted a child. Instead, she created tension. Sarah wanted a solution. Instead, she created conflict. She wanted relief, and instead she created pressure. And this is often the danger of helping God. As if, right? Helping God. We become so focused on solving the problem that we never stop to consider the consequences of our solution. The lesson in Genesis 16 is not that God cannot fulfill his promise. No. The lesson is that God's promises never required our interference. It never required our help. It never required our input. Human intervention. It never required it. And so, in our finale for today, part of the conversation, I want you to consider a few questions. Is there a situation in life that I'm blaming others for, even though I helped create it? Have I become frustrated by consequences that originated from decisions I made? Am I spending more energy managing complications than I spent seeking God's direction? That one right there causes me, I'm sure, to sit. Am I spending more energy trying to manage how I can create the solution rather than seeking God's direction? Have I mistaken ownership for blame? Because there is a difference. Ownership says, I played a role in this. You going to own this thing or not? Blame says, this is everybody else's fault. So today in Genesis 16, it challenges us to take an honest look at our own decisions, not to condemn ourselves and not to live in regret. Because if you do those things, the enemy's already binding you up and having you in a place that you're headed down a dangerous road of being defeated. But rather to learn and to grow, right? And not just grow, that we would trust God more deeply moving forward. So we're not going to let the enemy bind us up. We can't condemn us. No. And not to live in any regret, but we must be intentional about seeking God more and moving forward. You know, the moment Sarah said, "My wrong be upon thee," Genesis 16:5, she acknowledged something many people spend years avoiding. She acknowledged the thing that she created had consequences. And while she could not undo what had been done, she could recognize the lesson. Pause here for a moment. Oftentimes, the enemy tries to paralyze us in a place and say, well, you created this problem and it can't be undone. 'Tis true. But can we learn from what, first, as we said, ownership or blame? Will we take ownership, recognize it, and let the lesson move us forward rather than backward? Because we can't change what's behind us. So perhaps this lesson is the lesson for us as well. Not to remain trapped in guilt, not to remain in frustration, but to learn that God's timing is always safer than a shortcut. This is AM Sundays, and I am Evangelist Camelia Hill, and I want to thank you so much for joining me on tonight, today, this morning, wherever time zone you may be in. I want to thank you for joining me, or whenever you may watch this. And with that, I want to invite you. I was taught to always sow seed. And so until next time, I want you to be strengthened, be encouraged, and continue to walk by faith and sow seed into good ground. Good ground. The ways to give will be on the screen on the way out. No seed too big, no seed too small. I heard a great woman of God say, no seed too big, no seed too small. And so I want to take a leaf out of that book. No seed too big, no seed too small. That will help us continue to sow into the single parent families that come to us and we support. People of God, I love you. Until our next